"You'll always be a nice guy, but nice guys don't build extraordinary lives," she said before leaving me for someone more established. I stayed silent and focused entirely on myself. A year later, she saw my face featured in a magazine article about young entrepreneurs changing their industry completely. "You'll always be a nice guy," she said, setting her coffee down like she was closing a chapter. "But nice guys don't build extraordinary lives." I didn't say anything, not because I had nothing to say, but because what she actually meant was sitting right there between us, loud and obvious, dressed up in something that almost sounded like a compliment. She wasn't calling me kind. She was calling me small. And the worst part? A version of me, the one who'd spent 2 years trying to be everything she needed, almost believed her. I didn't know it then, but that afternoon, in that quiet apartment that suddenly felt like a waiting room, something shifted in me that would never shift back. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. We were 24, together for just over 2 years, living in the kind of relationship that looks fine from the outside and feels slightly off-center from the inside. The way a picture hangs on a wall, and you keep thinking it's crooked but never actually fix it. Her name was Bristol, and she wasn't wrong about everything. The first time I noticed something was changing, she came home talking about a guy named Hayes. She mentioned him the way people mention weather, casually, without looking at you, like it wasn't worth making eye contact over. "Hayes took his whole team to that rooftop restaurant in Midtown for a Wednesday lunch," she said, dropping her bag on the kitchen counter. "Just because they hit a quarterly goal. I was cooking pasta." "Good for them," I said. "He's 26, she added. I stirred the pot. She didn't say anything else that night. But Hayes started showing up in sentences a lot more after that, dropped in casually, mentioned offhandedly, like background noise that somehow kept getting louder. Hayes drove a car I'd looked up once and quietly closed the tab on. Hayes had just been featured in some startup newsletter. Hayes wore watches the way other people wear confidence. I didn't say anything about it for a while. That was probably my first mistake. Not because I was jealous, but because I was so focused on not seeming jealous that I stopped paying attention to what was actually happening. Here's what I was doing at 24. I was working a stable job at a mid-sized logistics company. Good salary, decent hours. The kind of job your family is relieved you have. But I had been quietly building something on the side for almost a year. A small product-based business in a niche I'd studied obsessively since college. Nobody knew how serious it was yet. Not my friends. Not my family. Not Bristol. I hadn't told her because it wasn't ready, and I didn't want to talk about something until there was something real to show. That was a habit of mine, staying quiet until I was certain. Bristol read that as passivity. She wasn't entirely wrong about that either. The Hayes comments became a pattern over the next 2 months. But the pattern wasn't just about Hayes. It was about a feeling she was building, brick by brick, sentence by sentence, that I wasn't going anywhere, that I was comfortable in a way that was starting to look permanent. One night, we were at dinner with her friend group, Sutton, Delaney, and a few others. The conversation turned to 5-year plans, the way it does when you're in your mid-20s and everyone's secretly comparing. Delaney talked about her finance career trajectory. Sutton mentioned she was thinking about launching her own thing. Then someone looked at me. "What about you?" I said something honest, that I was working on something, still early stages, didn't want to talk about it too much yet. Bristol laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was worse. It was a familiar laugh. The kind that says this is exactly what he always does. "He's always working on something," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The table moved on, but I sat with that for a long time. That night, back at the apartment, I brought it up. Not aggressively. I wasn't that kind of person. I asked her what she meant by it. She told me I was being sensitive. I said I wasn't being sensitive. I was asking a genuine question. She sighed, that particular sigh that meant she decided the conversation wasn't worth having, and said, "I just think you play things too safe." "Safe isn't the same as small," I said. "Sometimes it is," she replied. Then she went to the bathroom and brushed her teeth, and the conversation just ended, like a door that closes before you're finished walking through it. I lay in the dark for a long time that night. Not angry, just thinking. 2 weeks later, she told me she'd run into Hayes at a networking event. She mentioned it the next morning over coffee, casual as anything. "He's actually really interesting," she said. "His company's doing some really innovative stuff." "What kind of stuff?" She started explaining it, and halfway through I realized she knew more about his business model than she'd ever asked me about mine. I didn't say that. I should have. Instead, I just nodded and refilled my coffee and told myself it didn't mean anything. That was the second mistake. Over the next few weeks, Bristol changed in small ways. She started coming home later. She started making plans without mentioning them until after she'd already committed to them. She started talking about the future in a way that felt slightly disconnected from us, like she was describing a life that existed just slightly to the left of where we were standing. "I want to be with someone who's going somewhere," she said once, offhandedly, while scrolling her phone. I looked up. "You think I'm not going somewhere?" "I think you're comfortable," she said. "And comfort is great, but it's not ambition." I put down what I was reading. "Bristol, what?" "I'm building something." "I've told you that. You've been building something for a year and a half. At some point, building something looks a lot like not doing anything." There it was, out in the open. I could feel something harden in me, not in an angry way, in a done explaining myself way. I said, "Okay." Just that. "Okay. Yeah. Okay." She stared at me for a second like she'd expected a fight, or maybe an apology, and then she went back to her phone. I went back to my laptop, but I wasn't reading anymore. I was thinking. 3 days after that, she asked if we could talk. I knew what kind of talk it was. You always know. We sat on the couch, her on one end, me on the other, and she told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking. She said she cared about me. She said I was one of the best people she knew. Then she said it. "You'll always be a nice guy, but nice guys don't build extraordinary lives." A pause. "I need to be with someone who's already there, not someone who might get there eventually." I looked at her for a long moment. She looked back, not cruel, not cold, almost apologetic. Almost. And then I said the thing that I think surprised her most of all. Nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't ask if this was about Hayes, even though we both knew it was. I didn't defend myself. I didn't beg. I just nodded slowly, once, and said, "All right." She blinked. "That's it." "All right. Yeah," I said. "I think I've been waiting for this conversation for a while." She opened her mouth, closed it. "I'm not angry," I told her. "I'm not going to fight you on this. If that's how you see me, then we probably weren't seeing each other clearly." She left that night, and I sat in the apartment alone, in the quiet, and I made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not the kind that makes for a good story in the moment. Just a simple, clear, private decision. I'm going to build this thing, and I'm going to do it without needing anyone to believe in it first. The next morning, I woke up at 5:47 a.m. Not because I set an alarm, because I was ready. I made coffee. I opened my laptop, and I got to work. Here's what most people don't understand about building something real. It doesn't feel inspiring while you're doing it. It feels like spreadsheets at midnight. It feels like sending emails to people who don't respond. It feels like spending 3 hours on a problem that shouldn't take 3 hours, and then solving it, and feeling absolutely nothing because the next problem is already waiting. It's not cinematic. There's no montage. There's just the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And the only way you know you're moving forward is that the view slowly starts to change. I stopped going out. Not in a depressed, can't leave my apartment way. And I'm reallocating all of that energy way. The hours I used to spend managing Bristol's moods, and I say that without bitterness, just accuracy. I spent those on market research. The nights I used to spend going to social events I didn't really want to attend, dinner parties, rooftop bars, whatever it was. I spent those refining my product. My world got smaller, but it got sharper. And somewhere around the 2-month mark, something clicked. My business was a niche supply chain optimization tool for small manufacturers. I know that doesn't sound glamorous. It wasn't. But it solved a real, specific, unglamorous problem. And in the business world, that's worth more than a great story. I'd spent 18 months studying the exact pain points of mid-scale manufacturers who couldn't afford enterprise software but were drowning in inefficiencies. I had a working prototype. I had a handful of beta users, small factory owners who'd been patient enough to give me honest feedback. And I had something that actually worked. What I didn't have was reach. I spent the next 3 months doing the thing I hated most. Selling. Cold outreach. Emails to people I didn't know. LinkedIn messages that probably got ignored half the time. Calls where I sat on hold for 20 minutes and then got 30 seconds with someone who wasn't even the right person. I did it anyway. Because here's the thing about silence. Not the silence I'd given Bristol, but the silence of having nothing to prove to anyone. It's a different kind of fuel. When nobody's watching, when nobody's waiting for you to succeed, when there's no audience, you either do the work or you don't. And you know exactly which one you're choosing every single day. I chose it every day. At month 4, I landed my first paying client. a mid-sized manufacturing company in the Midwest. Their operations manager found me through a forum post I'd written 3 months earlier. He said he'd been looking for exactly this for 2 years. When he signed the contract, I closed my laptop and sat in silence for about 10 minutes. Not because I was overwhelmed, because it was proof. Not for anyone else. Just for me. It works. It's real. Keep going. I want to stop here and tell you something that people usually skip in these kinds of stories. The grief didn't disappear just because I got busy. There were nights, usually quiet Sundays, when I'd be working and I'd suddenly think about Bristol. Not with anger. Not with longing, exactly. Just with this strange, low-level ache that comes from realizing a version of your life is completely gone. I'd think about the good parts. The first year. The way she laughed at something unexpected. The way she made coffee on weekend mornings. And then I'd think about that conversation. Nice guys don't build extraordinary lives. And I'd sit with it. Not to punish myself, but because it was useful. She believed something about me that wasn't true. And I hadn't contradicted it with words. I was going to contradict it with time. By month 6, I had 4 paying clients. By month 8, I had 11. The product was working better than my original model had projected. The beta feedback had been more valuable than I'd realized. I hired my first contractor, then a part-time developer, then a full-time operations person, a woman named Raylan who'd been running logistics for a distribution company for 6 years and immediately understood the problem we were solving better than anyone I'd ever spoken to. She joined. We started moving faster. Around month 9, I got a call from a journalist. His name was Walker. He was writing a feature for a regional business publication, the kind of magazine you'd find in airport lounges and on the desks of people who follow industry trends before they become mainstream. He'd found me through one of my clients. He wanted to write about what we were building. I said yes, but I told him I wanted to wait until we had something more concrete to show. He said he could wait 2 months. I said I'd take 1. We agreed on 6 weeks. Those 6 weeks were probably the hardest of the whole year, because it wasn't just about building anymore. It was about presenting. I had to take everything I'd been doing in the quiet, every system, every client result, every piece of data we'd collected, and organize it into something that told a coherent story to the outside world. It's a different skill. Building is one thing. Showing what you've built is another. I was up until 2 a.m. most nights. Raylan kept sending me messages at midnight with updated numbers and corrections, and also I found this case study you should include. We pushed. The day Walker's article went live, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Midtown. I wasn't anxious. I was calm. The way you are after you've done everything you can do and the result is no longer in your hands. He sent me the link. I opened it. The headline read, 20-something entrepreneurs who are quietly reshaping their industries. My photo was on the top right of the print spread. Not a posed, headshot-style photo. A candid one Walker had taken during one of our meetings. Me at a table, laptop open, in the middle of explaining something, completely unself-conscious. I stared at it for a while. Ordered another coffee. Went back to work. I didn't post about it. I didn't send it to anyone. I didn't announce it. My mom saw it 3 days later because a neighbor of hers had picked up a copy at her dentist's office. She called me crying. I told her it was just a magazine. She said, "It's not just a magazine." I let her be happy. Here's the part of the story I didn't expect. About 11 days after the article went live, I got a text from a number I deleted but still recognized. Bristol. Hey, I saw the article. I read it. Put my phone face down on the desk. Picked it up again. Read it again. There's a specific feeling that comes with that kind of moment. Not triumph. Not vindication. Not the thing you imagine you'll feel. It was quieter than all of that. More like, oh, I didn't respond. Not immediately. Not because I was playing games. I'd grown past that. But because I genuinely didn't know what to say, and I'd learned not to say anything until I did. 2 days later, she sent another message. I just wanted to say I'm really proud of you. I know that probably sounds strange. Then, I think I underestimated you. Actually, I know I did. I read both messages. Sat with them for a while. Then I typed back. Thank you, Bristol. I appreciate that. I hope you're doing well. And I put the phone away. I want to be honest about something. There was a version of this moment I'd imagined. The version where I'm cold. Where I say something perfectly calibrated, witty, a little cutting, emotionally unreachable. The version where she realizes the full weight of what she lost, and I get to feel like I won. But when the actual moment came, I didn't feel any of that. I just felt settled, like everything that needed to happen had happened. Not because I'd proven something to her, but because I'd proven something to the part of myself that had almost believed her. The part that had sat quietly that night while she told me nice guys don't build extraordinary lives. That part didn't need her apology to heal. It had healed itself, one workday at a time. I heard through mutual connections, not through Bristol. She didn't tell me herself that things hadn't worked out the way she'd expected. Hayes, as it turned out, was very good at appearing established. He was excellent at the vocabulary of ambition, the right restaurants, the right watches, the right way of talking about disruption and innovation and scale. What he was less good at was the actual work underneath all of that. His company had been running on investor money and optimism for longer than the numbers justified. I didn't gloat about this. I didn't feel the satisfaction I might have expected. If anything, I felt something closer to understanding. Bristol had made a bet on optics. She'd been drawn to the visible markers of success, the things you could point to, show people, feel immediately proud of. That's not a character flaw. It's human. The problem was that she'd mistaken visibility for substance. She'd looked at my quiet and seen nothing. She'd looked at Hayes's noise and seen everything. And the world had taken its time gently correcting that red. Sutton, one of Bristol's friends from that dinner, the one who'd talked about launching her own thing, actually reached out to me a few months after the article. Not romantically. She'd started a small design consultancy and had a manufacturing client who was struggling with the exact kind of problem I solved. We set up a call. She was sharp, direct, completely professional, and referred me to 2 other clients over the next 3 months. I appreciated that more than almost anything else that came out of that whole chapter, because it wasn't about Bristol. It was just 2 people figuring out what they were building, helping each other where it made sense. That's how the right things connect. Quietly, usefully, without drama. At the 1-year mark, exactly 1 year after Bristol left, I sat in a coffee shop and looked at where things stood. 19 active clients. A team of 4 full-time employees and 2 contractors. Revenue that had gone from 0 to something I hadn't let myself project when I started. A second feature, this time in a national business publication, in the pipeline. A product that was working. A life that looked, from the outside, like an overnight success story. People would say that later. How did this happen so fast? And I'd always want to say, it didn't happen fast. It happened in hundreds of 5 a.m. mornings. It happened in emails that didn't get responses. It happened in evenings I spent working instead of going out. It happened in the silence I kept when someone I cared about told me I was small. It happened in the decision I made, quietly, privately, without announcing it to anyone, to prove her wrong without wasting a single second trying to prove her wrong. The best revenge isn't revenge. It's not even success. It's becoming so focused on building your own thing that the need for revenge quietly disappears on its own. I want to tell you about the moment I think about most out of everything. It wasn't the article. It wasn't the first client. It wasn't Bristol's text. It was a Tuesday morning, about 5 months in. I was at my desk at 6:15 a.m., coffee going cold beside me. I'd been working on a particularly frustrating integration problem for 3 days. And that morning, without warning, without ceremony, I solved it. I sat back, looked at the screen. The apartment was completely quiet. No one was watching. No one knew. There was no one to tell. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, clean, unwitnessed pride. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that belongs entirely to you. I think that's the thing she never understood about me, and maybe the thing I hadn't fully understood about myself until that Tuesday morning. I was never going to be loud about it. I was never going to wear the vocabulary of success before I'd earned the reality of it. I was never going to perform ambition for anyone's approval. Not because I was passive, not because I was comfortable, but because I was building something real in the only way I knew how to build things. Quietly, completely, without asking anyone's permission to take it seriously. I heard once, I don't remember where, that the most dangerous kind of person in any competitive space isn't the loudest one in the room. It's the quiet one who stopped needing to be seen. Because when you stop performing for an audience, all of that energy goes somewhere else. And it compounds, slowly at first, then all at once. Bristol saw the all at once part in a magazine and thought that's when the story started. It didn't. It started the night she walked out and I sat in the quiet and decided not to let her read define me. It started when I stopped explaining myself. It started when I realized that the only person whose opinion of my ceiling actually mattered was me. Delaney, another one from that dinner, told me months later, completely unprompted, that Bristol had shown everyone that article. Not in a proud of him way. In a complicated, hard-to-read way. I thought about that for a while. I hope she's okay, genuinely. I hope she found what she was looking for. I hope Hayes, or whoever came after Hayes, gave her the version of ambition she needed to see. And I hope, somewhere in whatever life she's building now, she learned the same thing I had to learn. That the most extraordinary people you'll ever meet won't announce themselves. They'll just quietly get to work. And one day you'll look up and realize they were never where you left them. I'm 25 now. The business is still growing. Raylan just got back from a client visit in Austin and sent me a voice note at 11 p.m. that was mostly her listing everything that went better than expected, which is becoming a habit I genuinely look forward to. My mom still keeps a copy of that first article. I told her that's a little embarrassing. She told me she doesn't care. I'm working on something new, a second product, adjacent to the first, filling a gap I noticed in our client data about 8 months ago. I haven't talked about it much. Not because I'm secretive, just because I've learned that the talking comes after the building. Always. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Bristol had believed in me. If she'd stayed. If she'd said, I see what you're building and I think it's going to work. Would it have changed anything? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe. Maybe the fire needs friction. Maybe the quiet needs an absence to fill. Maybe I needed to be in a room alone, with no one waiting, no one watching, no one measuring me against someone with a nicer car and a louder story, to find out what I was actually capable of. I'm not glad she left, but I'm not angry she did. I'm just here, working, building something that will still be standing long after anyone remembers the conversation that started it. She said nice guys don't build extraordinary lives. Maybe she was right about nice guys, but she had the wrong read on me, because I was never just being nice. I was being patient, and patience, it turns out, is just ambition that knows how to wait.